If you've watched last week's episode on my lost brother Angron, then please feel free to jump ahead 8 minutes to get to the point of this episode. If you're prone to melodrama, then please enjoy this introduction. What do we have in this universe other than each other? For the Emperor carved us, forged us, shaped us. Indeed, the worlds we each landed on in turn changed us, but we were whittled into works of art from the beginning, shards of the immaterium brought forth into sculpted bodies of pure perfection. Each of us, in turn, as unique as one another, completely unlike throughout the universe. Just 20. A score of beings as singular, as robust, as vital as us. Yet despite our differences, in our fraternity we find common ground. In our unlikeness, we are alike. Our sons, loyal, valiant, and headstrong though they are but pale shadows compared to us. It is in our kin that we can only truly feel understood. Ourselves and the Emperor of mankind. And perhaps Malcador, after a fashion. It was he who truly prepared us after all. All of us feel that pull. Except for him. It is said that in a universe of 1,000,000 sufferings, loneliness is the worst one of all. It carves away at the soul, erodes the mind, and whittles us away piece by piece. It is the death of 1,000 cuts, and none feel its touch more savagely than our brother Angron, the Red Angel. For we Primarchs, we paragons of the human form, feel our connection, some greater than others. Oh, we have our petty feuds, our quarrelling and competition, but under it all is the same tie that binds us, for none in this galaxy can compare to us. Yet he remains aloof. No, not merely aloof, but violently opposed. You can feel the rage billowing off him like heat off an inferno. It pulsates and aggravates and repels. None of us can truly feel kinship with him, nor he us. Of all the beings in the galaxy, he is the loneliest. In that, I suppose he is more like our father than the rest of us. But at least the Emperor has Malcador by his side. I used to be repulsed by him. That soon changed to pity when I learned the truth. For I believed him violent, as we all are, yet I believed him to be unrestrained malice, a machine of killing for killing's sake, rather than for a greater ideal, purpose, or objective. A being whose personality was two-dimensional and savage. A monster in the shape of a man, more comfortable in the panoply of war, decorated with blood and viscera than in his own clean skin. Soon thereafter I learned of his curse, his mutilation. The butcher's nails driven into his very brain, permanently sparking aggression, pain, and barbarity. From that moment on, I pitied my poor brother, a brain-damaged shadow of a Primarch, good for nothing but slaughter, all rational thought, planning, and joy crushed out of him by the years of pain and agony. But then I learned more. I do not know if my brothers know, nor even if Angron remembers it himself. It came to me via long channels of information, the scribblings of slaves in their arenas copied and recopied along a trail that led across the stars, the most minor of musings and observations. I learned what my brother was, what he used to be, what he could have become. It has shattered my heart, this grieving for a brother I never knew, a brother that never grew into the being he should have been. I lament for his demise, his corruption, his shattering. Tears well in my eyes as they have not done for so much loss up until this point. What a perfect being, a perfect scion, a perfect Primarch he could have been. Would I still recognize his face? Would the hard lines across his visage be softened with ones that still remembered how to smile? Would his voice bear a trace of warmth and affection for his sons? Could we have seen more to him? A fearsome warrior, joyous in victory, a passionate, charismatic, empathetic general who inspired entire worlds, rather than make them quake in fear. I know not if my father knows. I don't suppose it would make a difference either way. He arrived too late to Nuceria after all. Does he mourn as I do? Does his brilliant mind, in moments of laxity, stray to thoughts of what was, what may have once been? His son, our brother, is dead. He died on the sands of Nuceria so many years ago, at the hands of those barbarians known as the High Riders. Now, only the Red Angel remains, the stuff of legends, of horror and blood. I pray that, despite his deficits, he remains true to our cause, the cause of our Imperium. For truly, were he to lose his faculties, finally and completely, what force in this galaxy could stand beneath the weight of his axes? Welcome one and all, I'm Azazel, and for better or worse, you have stumbled your way onto my video discussing could Angron have become greater than Sanguinius? A big discussion, but one that I've heard people throw around with a great deal of gusto and emotion. After all, Sanguinius was the greatest, most glorious, and most noble of all the Emperor's sons. Angron, a permanently crippled and mutilated warrior. So what would things have looked like if history had taken a different turn? Well, be prepared now. Steel your hearts and gird your minds as we enter the most horrific place imaginable. The place where hope goes to die and where thirsting gods rack the souls of billions, while directing madness on the stage of our galaxy as easily as puppeteers pull on strings. Welcome to the 31st millennium. This episode will compare the impossible. Not only are we looking at a hypothetical question, comparing the skeins of fate to ones that never occurred, and unfortunately none of us are blessed with the powers of Tzeentch, but also comparing two Primarchs. Because comparing Primarchs is a futile task, an exercise in supposition. They each have their own strengths and weaknesses. They are behemoths of power, skills, and strategies. Creating a comprehensive, specific Primarch tier list is near impossible. After all, we have witnessed Corvus, Corax, and Guilliman go up against one another in training simulations. Corax won the first 3 bouts, Guilliman the next 17. From this, it's clear that Guilliman has the greater ability to analyze, strategize, and adjust in order to achieve total victory. Yet in a real setting, Corvus would have only needed a single kill to win. Similarly, Alpharius, or Omegon depending upon your thoughts, one of the twin Primarchs of the 20th Legion, lost the fight against Rogel Dawn, cementing the widely held belief that they were weaker than the Primarch of the Imperial Fists. Yet there were extenuating circumstances to that fight, with Alpharius, or Omegon, attempting to talk to Dawn. And truly, the Alpha Legion would never attempt to embark on something so upfront and direct if they desired to defeat an enemy. If Alpharius wished someone dead, they would never see the attack coming. So, as you can see, this discussion is fruitless, a waste of both my time and yours, a period of pure conjecture, yet I still wish to carry on, for Angron's tale is a tragic one, and despite his failings, I believe he could have been one of the greatest of the Emperor's sons. The only question is, could he have been the best? But let's discuss our two characters first before I make that comparison, so that those of you new to the hobby can understand where I'm coming from. To begin, Sanguinius. Sanguinius is undoubtedly the most noble of the Primarchs. You may disagree and perhaps claim one such as Vulcan, and I would completely understand, but Sanguinius was so glorious, so far removed from humanity that the nobility shined through the brighter. The Primarch of the Blood Angels landed on Baal Secundus as a child. Raised among that radiation-soaked world, with his adopted people who lived short, hard lives among that place, he led his people to victory over the mutant hordes that roamed the moon. I believe it was partially this that made him so caring towards humanity, for he was so perfect, even at that young age. Yet those short-lived, radiation-scarred people cared for him when he had no one else. Throughout the crusade, Sanguinius turned out to be charismatic, humble, and generous, a patron of the arts, not to mention a peerless fighter. For there were few who could match his skill at arms in battle. So temerarious, so fearsome, and so determined he was that he became an unstoppable force. This, in addition to his angelic wings that afforded him the power of flight and the ability to soar above the battlefield, made him an enemy to be reckoned with. But on top of this, few had the wisdom and restraint to rule as he did, for care and compassion were always at the forefront of his mind. Even when he was introduced to his legion, he assuaged their rabid nature and inspired them to become better. For they were the Revenant Legion back then, wild, bloodthirsty savages, obsessed with the gore and viscera of battle, joyous in slaking their thirst for blood on their fallen enemies even before an operation had ended. In their savage butchery, they were not so far removed from the world eaters of Angron that we know today. But he curtailed the worst of their urges through inspiration and compassion. The Legion would still be plagued by the Red Thirst, that desire to feast on dying enemies, but the Blood Angels would no longer be focused on its darkest aspects. He was a leader who would not willingly sacrifice populations for the guarantee of a swift victory. No closed-minded advances that saw his troops, his sons, cut down piece by piece in order to intimidate a defending army. No, for he cared. From the very depths of his soul, he had an empathy for those around him, and most particularly, his sons. For the Primarch Sanguinius and the Blood Angels shared a special and unique bond, similar to other legions. The Word-Bearers were avidly loyal to Lorgar. The Raven Guard occasionally inherit some of Corvus's gifts and curses, but the Blood Angels are, and were, in a manner, psychically linked to their Primarch in a passive, continuous way, one that still echoes in their blood 10,000 years later. So we have a noble, compassionate general, one who inspires those around him with his selflessness, one who can intimidate the foes and extract a bloody toll on those who face him on the battlefield due to his unnervingly powerful martial skills. And now our main subject, Angron. Angron's first memory was that of battle, of alien shapes and sibilant voices wishing him dead on the planet of Nuceria. Only recently come to consciousness, his life began in war. It would always bring him to war. After surviving the attack, slaughtering some of his assailants and putting terror into the hearts of those remaining, so much so that they turned tail and ran, he encountered his first humans on Nuceria, who promptly tranquilized Angron to turn him into a slave in the pits. I don't want to dive into every detail of Angron's life in this entry. There is so much to say, so I'll focus on the highlights. Yet do note that every single step along the road of Angron's life includes violence and futility, for he rarely, if ever, had a choice in his circumstances. His earliest experience highlights his personality best. It gives the true measure of what Angron was capable of, could have been capable of. It teases at the nobility and restraint that he naturally possessed. For in his first trial in the arena, he is surrounded by other slaves. Large, small, male, female, all slaves, all life essentially worthless on Nuceria. In the center of the arena is a ziggurat, a tiered pyramid. Acid floods the arena up from the bottom, rising in an ever-growing sea of burning death. And at the top of the ziggurat, space for a single person. Let the excerpt begin. The boy struggles against the heaving mass of frenzied slaves around him. He is easily stronger than any of them, despite his size, and even several of them working in concert fail to pull him towards the edge. The urge to lash out and send them falling into the mire builds inside him, fueled by screaming faces and the utter senselessness that surrounds him. The choice to fight feels right, deep in the marrow of his bones, and he knows instinctively how best to imbalance, disable, and overcome every one of the other slaves. It would be so easy, but he fights it. Every time one of the slaves hits the water, it hurts him. He doesn't understand how or why. As more and more are killed, it merges into a lightning storm behind his eyes, amplified by the grasping, clawing hands and gnashing teeth tearing at his skin. He fights against the environment that has ensnared him and not his fellow man, using only enough force to keep his footing, without throwing those attacking him off. He fights not to kill, but only to survive. Excerpt ended. Angron is an empath, psychically empathic to those around him. He feels the pain, the horror, the agony, the suffering of those around him. Each death to him is a deep black sting within his soul. To survive the encounter, he is forced to kill. To live, he must cut his soul. He minimizes pain, snaps necks before throwing others into the acid. In his victory, he is a victim of his circumstances, and it is a trend that would never stop. In the fighting pits, he gains a family of warriors, those who fought with him, bled with him for the house of Thalkir, his owners, only to witness them torn apart by a psyker who ripped them apart within the arena. He eliminated the psyker as a mercy killing, feeling her anguish at being forced to fight, at dying at his own hands. He bonded with a brother warrior named Hex. They had to tear themselves out from the stomach of a monstrous worm for the entertainment of the crowds and the high riders. Despite his best efforts, Hex passed away on the bloodied, gore-soaked sands that day, as Angron attempted to resuscitate his friend, to restart his heart, and bring back life from the beyond. The crowds jeered, laughed, and placed wagers on whether Angron would succeed. This cycle of brotherhood and loss could harden even the strongest of hearts, isolate one's personality for fear of further loss, but Angron kept caring. Each time he connected with new warriors, each time making himself emotionally vulnerable. When he eventually gained a new brotherhood under the sight of a grizzled veteran named Onomaeus, he discovered he could utilize his psychic abilities. With physical touch, he could take the pain and agony of multiple lifetimes into himself. With contact and focus, he became racked with terror and suffering, simply so that his friends, his family, could rest easily for a single night. You may wonder why I rambled on for so long over such trivial things. However, they are important. For all the Primarchs were born with gifts. Some psychic in nature, others were physical abilities that suited their styles. Angron was clearly made with empathic skills that manifested themselves early on. With more experience and more training, what could these skills have become? Could he have absorbed the pain of his legionaries, his sons, in a battle simply by force of will without physical contact? Could he have turned an army of space marines, ones who were designed to withstand the fiercest of pains anyway, into an unstoppable force with a simple thought? We will never know, but I imagine that his skills would only have improved with time. Time that he never got. For after winning a battle where he fought side by side with Ornomaeus, he was commanded to fight his friend. He refused. Point blank, he would never betray his brothers, and in response to his act of rebellion, he was tranquilized and destroyed forever. From that point on, the being whom Angron was supposed to become was dead. For in that moment they installed the butcher's nails within his skull. Pieces of archaeotech rejigged and refitted by the horrific minds of Nuceria. These horrendous devices are implanted directly into the brains of individuals, deadening emotional responses save those creating adrenaline, electric signals relating to anger and rage, remapping brain structures and encouraging violent aggression. However, these devices were never built for a Primarch, and so the effects were far worse. For they were forced to actively remove parts of Angron's brain to make room for the nails. Every moment for him would be an agony, except for that of slaughter, which would bring a moment's peace. He would no longer feel anything but rage and pain, except for those brief stints of battle. And he would never be able to remove them, for if he did, he would die. These horrific devices became the only things keeping Angron's brain functioning. Yet they simultaneously were killing him. Slowly, very slowly, piece by piece they would claim his life. They were both his lifeline and his death sentence. All that empathy, the core of who he was supposed to be, wiped out by cortical implants that caused agony and rage. He didn't even remember killing his friend Ornomaeus. Only blackouts and blood-soaked vistas would exist in his mind. We will breeze on for the sake of time, but Angron, in one of his more lucid moments, led a rebellion of slaves on Nuceria. They were successful, for a time. His brother and sister gladiators and gladiatrixes would claim so many lives against all the odds. But eventually, they would fail. Hounded, hunted, and facing an heroic last stand, this brotherhood of warriors prepared to meet their end with smiles on their lips and blood on their swords. One final fuck you to the slave masters of Nuceria on whose hands lay the blood of millions of their kind. Only Angron would not be there for that last stand. The Emperor would teleport him away from the battle. Angron's brothers and sisters would die on those sands, alone and forgotten by all except Angron, perhaps wondering why their leader, their friend, their brother abandoned them. Now I've done enough reciting of basic facts for now, but this is one heartbreaking moment for Angron and one god-awful decision by the Emperor. For Angron, it was another moment when he was powerless. From his first moment of being attacked, to being tranquilized, to failing to save his brothers in the arenas, to having the butcher's nails carved into his head, this moment was the one time he was truly free. His final chance to make his own decisions and face his own fate, and the Emperor robbed him of that. Angron was, as far as Angron was concerned, just another slave, bound to the whims of another tyrant. And from Angron's point of view, I can't say he's completely wrong. For how many other Primarchs got to keep their families? Russ kept his Jarls and allowed them to attempt the transformation into Space Marines, despite being well beyond the recommended age. The Lion kept Luther, and Lorgar kept Corferon in ways that saw them genetically enhanced so that they weren't quite Space Marines, but almost. Angron got nothing. I veered slightly off topic here, but it pisses me off to no degree, and I will do an entry on this at some point which will involve just half an hour of me basically doing, you know what really grinds my gears? But it makes me irate beyond belief. Back on track now, sorry about that. Beyond that time, and on his reunification with his legion, we see devotion, at least on one side. For Angron despised his legionaries. For him, they were imposters trying to replace the family he had left to die on Nuceria. For the legionaries, he was their father, and they, for the most part, were devoted to him. Devoted enough to follow him into madness and install butcher's nails in themselves. Yes, a small contingent fought against such insanity, but when it comes to willingly, mentally crippling yourself, you'd expect a far greater number to rise and revolt. Angron would continue the crusade in anger, not fighting for the Emperor, but merely to slaughter planets and gain a brief reprieve. It wasn't until the Horus Heresy that his final betrayal occurred at the hands of his brother Lorgar. In order to save him from the nails, Lorgar orchestrated a ritual to see Angron become a demon prince. The final betrayal. The last decision, once more not made by himself. Eternal servitude to an altogether darker master. But I digress, and for that I apologize. But for now, those of you new to the hobby have scratched the surface of Angron's life and deeds. But for now, the question is, could Angron have been greater than Sanguinius? Let your mind imagine that Angron never received the butcher's nails. He never despised his brothers, never lost his mind to the carnage and chaos of battle, and honed his psychic talents to the degree that they were always supposed to become. Comparison 1. Fearsome combatants in warfare. Both the sons of Sanguinius and sons of Angron were masters in close combat. But how much of that was tradition and practice, or simply in their nature, is up for discussion. But both Sanguinius and Angron were masters at it. Angron was perhaps boosted by the butcher's nails, made faster and stronger by their effects, yet they also hindered him by clouding his mind from strategy and poise. So I would say that, more than likely, Angron without the butcher's nails, let's just call that pure Angron for now, would definitely rate among the top tier Primarchs when it came to combat. 2. Inspirational figures. I would put them both as a solid yes in this category. Sanguinius was glorious, beautiful, and numinous in appearance. His wings were angelic, his features cast from a marble work of art, his eyes deep and compassionate. A pure Angron would not only have been a force of nature, as all Primarchs are, but his empathy would have shone through, as true empathy always does. Not only that, but his psychic abilities may have advanced enough to become an aura around him. Now, this is pure conjecture. You can choose to disagree, and that's okay, I'm not a lawmaster. But I imagine the natural progression of his talents would have calmed and inspired to an equal degree. 3. Purity. A pure Angron could have curtailed his legion's profligacy for savagery, in much the same way that Sanguinius did with his sons, but with one difference. Instilling martial honor and etiquette would have permanently altered the legion. The nature-nurture conundrum would have created a legion of hardened, noble warriors, who were experts in close-quarters combat. However, Sanguinius' sons would always struggle with the flaw. That thirst for blood, the need for slaughter, always one bad battle away from releasing their fangs and feasting on the dying of their enemies, and in some cases, attacking their own brothers. Sanguinius too felt the red thirst, admittedly a weaker version, one that could be held in check, but he still felt it. So could a pure Angron have been greater than Sanguinius? Possibly? but not probably. For there is one thing missing from Angron, despite my supposition and wild stretches of expectation: his tactical acumen. For the Angel was a master at strategy along with everything else. Now, as a Primarch, there's no denying that a pure Angron would be echelons above even the most tactically astute of humans. But we never had the chance to see him in that situation before the nails were implanted. Every moment that we see is merely another struggle to survive, another fight to win, never a strategist. So for me, I would place a pure Angron as a solid top-tier Primarch, without a doubt. His skills and faculties a glorious example of what a Primarch and a Legion could have been. As for being the best, well, what do you think? Do you believe that he could have been the Emperor's Paladin? Glorious, steadfast warriors that set the best of examples throughout the Great Crusade. Would you place a pure Angron at the top of the list? Let me know down below. And remember, be courteous to those who disagree. This is a made-up world and a suppositional scenario within this fictional universe. It's just a fun question to ask ourselves. With that said, thank you for listening. Please do drop a like, comment, or subscribe, and constructive criticism is always welcome, for without you, no one would be listening. Now do enjoy your day or night, and I hope you've indulged in some escapism from reality. For that's why we are here, isn't it? Until next time.